Hi everyone, I'm Jody at Fort Worth Fabric Studio, and today we're going to be making block D and E. These are churn dash blocks, and this is for our Cozy Up Mystery Quilt. So go ahead and get your instructions printed out and have your fabrics all labeled and ready to go, and we will get started. Let's get started with pieces J and M, and we are going to be making some half square triangles. So what we're going to do is take one of our light colored blocks, and I usually just go ahead and place it. It doesn't have to be perfect, quite perfect yet, pretty close, on top of the dark. And then I'm going to use the Omni Grid marking ruler, and if you take this yellow line that is in the middle and put it at the point here and then at the point here, line that up just like that, and then draw along the outside, each side of your ruler. This is going to give you a ½ inch mark exactly here. You got to mark on either side. This is going to actually be your cutting line. Sorry, this is your sewing line. I said that wrong. These are going to be your sewing lines right here. You're going to sew these lines, and then we will end up cutting right down the middle here, and we'll end up with 2 half square triangles. So I'm going to go through and mark the rest of these so that we are ready to sew. Okay, we have these ready to go. I'm going to take these to the machine and sew on each of our drawn lines, and then we will come back and cut right down the middle. So let's get started sewing. We are now going to sew along each of these lines that we drew on our square. So make sure your squares are just lined up perfectly this time, and we will get sewing on these. I'm going to do a little bit of chain piecing, which means I'm going to come back in here and just sew down the right-sided line first on each one of these, and then I'm going to come back and sew down the left side. Let's snip in between each one of these, and then we're going to go back and sew the other line. Snip between each of these, and then we will be ready to cut them. Okay, we've got our squares, and now we are ready to cut right in between here. Okay, you can choose on these to either cut between with scissors, which is how I normally do it. You may want to lay it down on your table and cut it with a rotary cutter and ruler if that makes you more comfortable. For me, I feel like it's just as easy to eyeball it and kind of cut right down in between those. So you're going to end up with a set of two squares. These will be squares when you open them up this way. Let's go ahead and cut all of these apart, and then we'll be ready to do some pressing. All right, everyone, so I've got all my squares cut in half, so now we have all these cute little triangles, and we're going to go press them. But I want to tell you something that is super, super important. When you go to press, make sure you press your seam going this way toward the dark side, because if you don't, you're going to have trouble trimming these up on the next step. I made a practice block, and that was a problem I had. I didn't really think it mattered, but it really does. So let's go press all of these. Make sure your seam presses this way, and then we'll come back up and trim these all up and make them look just perfect. Okay, so we now have a pretty little stack of half square triangles, and they may look a little wonky, and that's okay because we're going to trim these up with our block lock ruler. This is the ruler I was suggesting last week that you might want to use. So all your seams should be pressed toward the dark print, and we're going to take one here and trim it up. So let me show you how to do this. Just lay this on your mat. It doesn't matter how it's laying. Your block lock letters need to face this way toward the seam. And if you put it on here, you'll kind of feel it like lock in on that seam. That helps keep your ruler from slipping as you're trimming these up, and this is just super handy. So you can see underneath my ruler, like this isn't even fully square, but we've got plenty of extra to work with on here. We only have to trim these up to 4.5 by 4.5. So I've got my square, I'm going to set my ruler on, lock it into that seam, and I'm going to slide my ruler down this way. And you can see right here is 1, 2, 3, 4.5. So I'm eventually going to end up trimming this all the way around this little 4.5 inch mark. But to begin with, I'm going to leave a little that we can trim off here and make it perfect, and then we'll come back along and trim off along this edge. So first of all, we're going to hold the ruler here and trim this way. And then this way. Now when you trim on this top edge, it's helpful if you almost angle that ruler in, or your rotary cutter in just a little bit, so you get right up next to that ruler, or right up next to the ruler there, and you get a nice clean edge. Now we are going to turn this around this way and pull our ruler back, because we've got our 1 on this side now, and we're going to pull this down to 4.5. And sometimes you kind of have to pull a little bit here to make sure things are still locked in. And when you pull it into the 4.5, you can see we're at 4.5. This is nice and straight all the way here. Now we've got the extra along these two sides to cut. So we're going to cut off up this way and cut along this top edge. And now we have a perfectly cut 4.5 inch square. These turn out to be such pretty little half square triangles. So we're going to go through now and cut the rest of these. And I'm going to do the next one slow, just in case you need to see that a little closer, and then we will just move on through and complete them. Okay, so now we have 16 half square triangles, all perfectly trimmed to 4.5 by 4.5 inches. And I hope you guys enjoyed using that block ruler, because it sure is a time saver. Let's get going on the next step. All right, we are getting ready to sew our K and N blocks. So we're going to do a little more chain piecing. And if you haven't already, now's a good time to put in your 1/4 inch foot if you have one. So we're going to put these together and sew in a 1/4 inch seam along the long edge, and then we'll be back. Okay, we have all of our K and N sewn together. So we're going to now go take these, trim them apart, and then press the seam. And you will want to press your seam once again this way toward the dark fabric. So we'll go press all of these, and we will be back. I'm back with my squares all pressed. I pressed the seam this way, and I wanted to point out if they're uneven at all. I had a couple of mine where the white piece was slightly longer, and that can just happen from when you cut it if it's not exactly right. If that does happen, then just trim them off before you get sewing any further. That way they'll all be even and it'll be easier to work with. So these are ready to go, and our next step is to start putting these together. So we're going to take one of our half square triangles next to one of our KN pieces and then back again to one of our half square triangles. And we are going to make 4 of these rows. So I'm going to put right sides together, and I feel like it helps if you lay it out this way before you get started. So I've got mine laid this way. I'm going to sew this seam, and then I'm going to come back and sew the other seam. Okay, so now we have this seam sewed together. I'm going to open this up, and then this piece is going to go right sides together this way, and now we will sew this seam right here together. Okay, so here is our row. We are going to make 4 of these. So that will be the next step, and I'm going to put these together. We have all 4 of these rows done, and we will be pressing our seam this way and this way. So both seams here are going to turn in toward the middle. I'm going to go press these, and then I'll be right back. Okay, these are completely ready to go. They're all pressed, and now we're going to take our block L and a block KN, and we're going to sew KN, these pieces here, on either side of our square. This is actually going to be the center of our churn dash block, like this. So we're going to sew 2 sets of these. Okay, we are now going to press our seams this way toward the middle, toward the dark, and then we will be putting our first churn dash block together. Okay, so we now have the pieces or the rows that we need to complete these churn dash blocks. So what we're going to do is take 2 of these from up here and just turn them around like this, and now you can kind of see how this block is going to come together. And it's so pretty. So we're going to take these and sew right sides together. So you'll want to fold this down, and this is going to get sewn here together, and then you'll open that back up, and you'll sew this piece on here, right sides together, and it'll open up like this, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a look at how it's going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these 2 seams right here. Okay, here's a quick glimpse of our churn dash blocks sewn together. I'm going to go press my seams, and they will go down this way and up this way. And then we'll go ahead and put the second block together the exact same way. And when we come back, we'll be ready to start on the other churn block, which is basically just the opposite of this one in color. We are almost there. You guys have almost made churn dash blocks. Hi everyone. Well, I am back with these pretty churn dash blocks, and I do have a couple tips for you. I found it a little difficult to match up these little points here right in this section and this section. So you either want to pin it really well, or consider on this middle section, I told you to press the seam this way toward the dark. If you press the seam this way toward the light, and then the rest of your seams are pressed this way, when you put those together, right sides together to go ahead and sew it, while your seams will just kind of nest up against each other, and it will help match up this point. So you might want to consider doing that. The other block that we're going to make is just like this, only it's the opposite. So I'm going to turn the camera off and go make the other block that's just like this, and then I'll be back and show you how they look all finished. So I'm back with this churn dash block. This is the one that's primarily white, And I did go ahead, like I mentioned before, on this one, I pressed the middle seam going this way, and then the top and bottom I pressed right here going this way. So in these little spots right here, the seams, like, they nested together really well, and I felt like my points came together a lot easier. So you might want to consider doing that. So we have our ones that are primarily white and the two that are primarily dark. They're all done. I trimmed them up to 12.5 by 12.5. Just be sure that you leave a little bit of an edge right here so that when your next seam gets sewn down here, you don't sew through your points. So you guys, we are all done with the blocks. Next week we will be putting everything together and we're going to have a whole quilt. So I will see you guys next week. Talk to you soon. Bye.